I've got a number of questions that you guys asked. I'm going to give a few to Leo to kick off. So Leo, we're in London, the heart of Shoreditch, famous for tech, innovation, digital disruption. I said to you earlier, we've got all 12 accelerators, Entrepreneur Spark powered by NatWest, represented today across our entire community. From your observations and opinion, the UK's reputation for creating tech startups that can scale, and I'm particularly interested in your observation and the contrast around this mindset and culture, this Silicon Valley state of mind.
Yeah. So it is a state of mind. Like I said earlier, there's no reason why someone sitting in this room can't build a more successful company than someone in Silicon Valley. I really believe that. I think what has happened over the last 5 years or so, and I think the programs that you guys are doing are really important. I think what the UK missed was some of the infrastructure, right? I mean, you have super smart people, you have great universities, you have a very strong economy. I mean, I travel the world, trust me. I mean, even though this crazy Brexit thing happened, which I don't totally get, we won't spend time on that. But I mean, but I mean, you have all of the great stuff, and I think a little bit what was missing 5 or 10 years ago was this culture around, hey, we can build a company, and we can have support of lots of different people, and we can create a community. Right? And one of the things that's important with startups is community, right? Being able to share experiences and ask opinions and recruit, right? And so that part I think is different now. And I really believe you have every advantage that Silicon Valley has. And I would even argue in some cases you have one advantage that they struggle with, and that's recruiting talent. Because in Silicon Valley, it is a dog-eat-dog world. I mean, even for us, I mean, you know, we find someone, we want to hire them. I mean, Google will throw, sounds crazy, but for a really good engineer, they'll throw $1 million of stock at them, $1 million. Come to work for Google for 2 years and we'll give you $1 million, or for 3 years or 4 years. I'm serious. And so it's you don't, luckily in the UK you don't have that yet. Now, someday you might, but I think the advantage you have is you have great talent and great people. And I think the other thing that's happened that I've noticed is a lot of people are leaving the bigger companies and wanting to go to startups. And I think that's great. And that was a big trend that happened in Silicon Valley, right? Where, and there's a few companies in particular. I actually live in San Diego, and I work in San Francisco. But you know, our most famous company in San Diego is a little company called Qualcomm, for those of you in the mobile space. And there have been 187 companies, that was the last count that I saw, of companies that were spun out as startups out of Qualcomm in San Diego, 187 of them. And so that same thing I think can happen here, where people can leave big companies and have the bug and create companies, etc.
So touching on that, the ecosystem is really important. I'm not going to ask you about that, you've touched on it, but the serial entrepreneurs, the government, local authority, the corporates, the funders, education, to what extent do the large corporates, the transformers he talked about, cultivate that environment within, that growth environment within Silicon Valley?
Well, I mean, I think what's happened, it's interesting, is that the large traditional enterprises are opening up sort of software centers, in some cases in Silicon Valley, because what they've figured out is they can't transform themselves inside the walls of their palaces. So they have to create something new and innovative. So I mentioned Ford. Ford invested $185 million in Pivotal about 4 months ago. And people would say, like, why is a car company investing? And they, by the way, they had not made an investment in 12 years. So it's not like Ford was out spreading money all over the world. Why did they spend $185 million on Pivotal? Well, they did it because they're in Detroit, right? They have really smart people. I mean, building a car is pretty damn complicated, right? I mean, very complicated. But they wanted, literally, the CEO of Ford, he wanted to change the culture of Ford. He wanted this culture. He wants to design cars the way we build software. And so we're actually building in Ann Arbor, which is where the University of Michigan is. It's a fantastic technology school. And basically in Dearborn, where they're headquartered, 2 labs like this. And our people and their people will be working together to build the next generation of cars and software for Ford. So that's what they're doing. They're in effect creating their own startups inside of their companies because they know they'll never innovate. They can't succeed if they try to do it with waterfalls and committees and management structures. I mean, Tesla's going to kill them, right? And so that's kind of what we're seeing. And I think the great thing for all of you is they're becoming buyers again of technology companies. I mean, I think that there will be a tenfold number of companies interested in buying technology companies over the next 10 years. It won't be Microsoft and Cisco and Google. It'll be Ford. It'll be General Electric. It'll be banks buying fintech companies. So it's almost like if you're a startup, the number of potential acquirers, I think, has grown dramatically because they now need software and they need new business models. And that's what you're doing. You're building those new business models and software that they want to buy. So I think I don't think there's ever been a better time to be an entrepreneur.
And I agree, sir. I think those partnerships, JVs, acquirer or buyer, but also access to the networks, the supply chain, the expertise and knowledge of some of those corporates is key as well.
Totally.
So I've got a couple of to be or not to be questions, and I think these will be really important for the audience. So you mentioned it earlier, to be the CEO or not to be the CEO, that's the question. As the business grows though, how crucial is it to continue as a CEO or consider a different leadership structure?
Yeah, that's a great question. It was almost like, was that Macbeth or what is the one?
It was Shakespeare.
Well, Shakespeare, I love it. Fantastic. You know, here's the honest answer to that one. It depends. There's no answer, okay? I mean, I wouldn't take anything away from Mark Zuckerberg. I mean, Mark Zuckerberg is a great CEO. He's built Facebook, slightly successful company, right? But for every Mark Zuckerberg, there are 1,000 founders who shouldn't be the CEO. So it's kind of that kind of thing, right? It's probably 1 in 1,000.
But you should consider it.
But you should consider it. And if you know, I probably one of my most proud companies is a semiconductor company in San Diego called MaxLinear. They build these digital tuners and a bunch of stuff. The founder is an amazing, brilliant guy. He got his PhD from Berkeley, UC Berkeley. He got his MBA from Wharton. He wanted to be the CEO. I mentored him. I mean, and it was like therapy. I mean, because he's a little crazy. But so we got along great. No, but he was, and this is the most important thing I could tell you. He was self-aware. Being self-aware is really important, and the opposite of self-awareness is insecurity. Okay, so what you have to ask yourself is, what's driving me to be the CEO? Is it my ego and my insecurity? Or do I really believe in my soul that I am the most qualified person to lead my company? Most of the time the answer is you're not. I mean, that's the honest answer. Most of the time you're not. And that's okay. I mean, it's okay. I mean, one of the founders of this thing called Pivotal is one of my best friends. His name is Scott Yara. He's one of our co-presidents here at Pivotal. He's brilliant. I mean, he's breathtakingly brilliant and such an amazing human being. I mean, he has a heart like you've never seen. And I backed him. That's how I got here to this crazy company. I backed him in a company called Greenplum. And Greenplum built a massively scalable database to compete with a little company called Teradata. And our database kicked their you-know-what. We were 4 to 5 times faster and 1/25th the cost. And we weren't dependent on any hardware. We could run on any hardware. And I mean, Scott himself, for years, sort of couldn't decide, like, should I, shouldn't I? In the end, we talked and we hired a guy named Bill Cook, who happens to be our other co-president here at Pivotal. And Bill came in as the CEO of Greenplum, and we built that company and we sold it to EMC for like $500 million. And that's how we all got here. And one of the core technologies of Pivotal is this thing called Greenplum. I think, if Scott did it again today, Scott would probably say, hey, I'm ready, I want to be the CEO. But back then, he wasn't ready. Yeah. And it wasn't like he wasn't the most important. It wasn't like, honestly, he made 90% of the decisions he probably made anyway, because he was so much smarter than the rest of us. But my point was, he knew that being CEO was more than just about what the the technology and the product was. It was about building a sales organization. It was about relationships. And so he really needed to have someone. And Bill Cook had run Sun Microsystems' entire sales and service group for the United States. I mean, he was the perfect person to marry with Scott. So you had this brilliant technologist, this brilliant business person who knew how to sell databases, and they became a team, and they won together. And so that's I think I'd answer that.
And these are questions that are coming from you that you submitted, guys. So just bear with me and know that. So you mentioned the 2 credit cards, the remortgage of mum's house. So the other to be or not to be question is to bootstrap or not to bootstrap. What builds the most value in the tech sector?
I think you got to bootstrap in. So I don't know if this will work because I probably how many periods are there in soccer in year football? 4? 2. First half, yeah.
First half, second.
It doesn't work. It's not a good analogy. I'm going to use baseball. I'm sorry. So the only reason why is because baseball has 9 innings. I need more than 2 halves to make the analogy work. No offense. So I think if you think about a baseball game as 9 innings, inning 1 and 2 should be bootstrapping, right? I mean, you don't really want to take money from someone like me until you've got ideally a proof of concept and in the perfect world, some customer validation. You know what I mean? At that point, then my money can really accelerate the business. Now, I mean, there are some cases where you come up with an idea, and another one of my really successful companies, literally, I sat with the entrepreneur on an envelope, we decided on the business, I wrote him a check, and the rest was history. It happens. I'm not saying it's terrible, but I think there's a lot to be said for doing the bootstrapping and having the discipline to struggle with figuring out what is my customer, what is my product, how am I going to price it, how am I going to deliver it, what is the requirements. I mean, if you can do that with bootstrapping, I think you're going to be much better off. And what it will translate into is you owning more of the company. Because if I write you a check on the envelope, I'm going to own like 60% of the company. If I write the check after you've basically proven you have a business, I might only own 25, 30% of the company. So you're trading off how much of the company you own based on how early you want me to take risk, right? I mean, the more risk, I got to own more because I'm taking more risk. So I'm a big bootstrapper. I like bootstrapping. Then in inning 3 or 4, you take an A round, in inning 5 and 6, a B round, and then at inning 7, you're trying to make this decision, do I sell the company or do I keep going? And away we go.
Do you want me to keep going, or is there any burning questions from the audience? I'm conscious we've got about 5 minutes. But the reason I'm asking these is because they're really general and hopefully applicable to everyone. I don't want to get really personal, guys, so hand up at the back.
Can I ask a weird question?
Weird is good. I like weird.
If you were to do it all again,
Yeah,
right, you've got $5,000 in the bank account, you haven't got any ties or anything like that, where would you base yourself? What would you do? What industry or sector would you focus on? And what would the business look like?
Yeah, I'll give you that answer. It'll be a weird answer, but I honestly think there's more than one. That's the only reason I'm hesitating is I could think of a dozen. But I mean, the one that comes to mind, I would stay where I live in San Diego. I mean, I'm going through my second divorce. I mean, it's not all glory. I mean, it's not all this success comes at a price. I travel 200 nights a year.
You're in good company. We've got 4 between us.
So
I might get that in.
There you go. Thank you very much. Yeah. So I would have stayed home more. I wouldn't have started companies in New York and companies in San Francisco and run a company now that has offices all over the world. I would have stayed home. And you know what space I really like? I really like virtual reality. I mean, I really like that space. I think virtual reality, and I have a great investment in it, so I mean, that's partially what's driving my psyche, but I think that people have no idea what the impact of virtual reality will be and how it will change us as human beings and education and healthcare, and so I would do something in that space. That would be my quick and dirty answer.
A good answer, because it touches on some of the big 5 disruptors that maybe are out there, and you've just given us one of them. There was a hand went up here.
Yeah, so you mentioned laundry heap, I think.
Yeah.
Around the corner, yeah. So I guess you've got like a proof of concept, and you've got like a customer validation because it's yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if that needs to get to 100 million valuation to make it interesting, what factors would you measure to like analyze the scale of that?
Yeah, so that business, and I have a lot of, this is why I'm a weird dude. Like I spent like, and I won't bore you, but I've been to 5 countries in 4 days in Europe. So, I've had some time on some planes, but I've thought a lot about their business. I think the thing that I'm most worried about in that business is the cost. Because they've got some bloke who I'm watching in GPS drive around and pick up my clothes, and he's got to bring it back. And I think, and don't quote me because I didn't look at my credit card, but I think I paid 14 pounds. So, I mean, they picked up my clothes, they washed my clothes, they ironed my clothes, and they returned it for 14 pounds. So I just would want to know, like, are you making money? You know what I mean? Now, maybe that the business model says, hey, for the first year, we're going to break even, but I wouldn't feel good if they were charging me 14 pounds and it was charging them 25. So that was the one in that one that I was trying to wrap my head around is, I mean, can you really do it? And how does it work? I'm envisioning him on a motor scooter or something and not paying for parking. And I mean, I'm just, my head's like, well, I mean, wait, what? There are all these things, right? Maybe it's the tube. I don't know. I don't know. But that would be the thing that I'm trying to figure out. And I don't understand the tube. I use it sometimes. I get lost every time.
Excellent. Last question, yeah.
You mentioned about manifold increase in potential big companies who would buy the entrepreneur's innovative idea. And I wondered that in the same section you mentioned about Detroit and other slow-moving mentality and mindset. So what would be the sort of aspect with regards to the culture of a set mindset, very much railed in one way of doing things versus the fluidity and flow of the entrepreneurial ethos? And does that mean that the entrepreneurs should take a really hard look and sometimes say no to acquisition offers?
Yeah, there are 2 questions. I'm going to do them in reverse. Is that cool? So with regard to the question around should you say no to an acquisition offer, I mean, at the end of the day, and I feel very passionately about this, the startup isn't about you, it's about the company, and it's about the employees and the investors and a return on investment. So eventually you have to sell to somebody, right? Now, in a perfect world, you sell to a company where culturally it's great and it's great for the employees. And I've been in situations, I'm in one right now, I can't tell you what it is, but there are 2 buyers. And as a VC, this might sound crazy, but I'll probably take a lower price from one of them because I actually think it's a better cultural fit and it's better for the employees. You know what I mean? Now that's me. Now, maybe that's why I'm not, the best VC in the world, and I guess. But I think for me, it's a very personal thing, these investments, and I get very attached to the people and I want the people to have a good outcome. But the answer can't be, I don't want to sell my company because I'm having too much fun running it and I don't want to be part of something else. That's not fair either. In terms of the culture, I'll just say 3 quick things, and I mentioned a few of them. I think this idea of failing fast, that's really important. It's the biggest cultural shift that large companies have to get over. I mean, what normally happens in a big company is that they do this analysis, they hire a consultant, they spend a few $1 million thinking about an idea, then they basically start to waterfall it and they spend another couple $1 million designing it, then they outsource it and they spend God knows 6 or 8. I mean, they basically get to this I'm being serious, $20 million project that's going to land in 2 or 3 years. And even if it was successful, even if which generally it's not, even if what they thought they were going to build, they built and it worked, 2 or 3 years from now, it probably isn't relevant and the customer doesn't care. So you need to have that failure. You need to iterate very rapidly, right? You need to you should be building your prototypes in weeks. You should be getting customer feedback immediately. You should be iterating on versions. I mean, we literally have people where we load hourly different versions of code. That's what our Cloud Foundry platform allows you to do. That's what having a platform does. I mean, we literally are constantly updating the software, getting feedback. So to me, that iterative cycle is sort of next. And the third one, and this is the hardest one too for them, you have to work in a small team. We think 8 to 12 people. Like, we don't think development projects should be 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 100 people. That's destined to fail. You may be building a huge project and you may need 8 teams of 8 people to make it up, but you need to break it into pieces and let those teams have autonomy over parts of it and give them the power to make decisions. And it's not just technical people, it's business people, it's product managers, it's UI designers, it's the data scientists, because every application, it's another big part of our business, we do a lot with data. Every great piece of software is analyzing information continuously and modifying itself so that it's better and learns and gets smarter. And so that whole thing, I think, is what I think it would be important.
Okay, so I've got the mic, so I've got the last question. That's the last one. So a bit more light-hearted, but if you to go back in time, in history, and talk to one person, A, who would it be? B, why? And what would be your killer question?
Albert Einstein. Why? He's in a handful of people, I think, who've had more impact on humanity than anyone. I mean, the theory of relativity and what it's done. And I'd ask him if he was stoned when he thought of it.